Welcome to the Smokies and Wine podcast with JB and Jamie, with the best guests, wine and chat. You know it makes sense. Sponsored by Clackenview Wealth Management, working with you today to plan for your tomorrow.
Lee, thank you very much for joining us. It's episode 4 of the Smokies and Wine podcast. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you, and thank you for having me. I can only assume you've not seen or heard anything I've actually done to invite me. So I always jump at the chance when somebody says, "Would you talk to us?" Because most people don't. So yeah, thank you very much for the invite. It's an absolute pleasure.
No problem. We asked you to choose a bottle of wine. We're very excited. We've kept our hands off it, although we have opened it. The Zuccardi Altamira Cabernet Franc. First of all, what made you choose this particular bottle?
You know, it's always really tough, isn't it, when somebody says choose a bottle of wine, because there's so many out there and there's so many different things that I really enjoy. But ultimately, I had a bottle of this I was trying to get rid of out of the cellar. No, not at all. Argentina is a really important area or country for me, not just in my work but in my personal life. And I'm a huge fan of Zuccardi as a producer. I really like what they do. I'm also a massive fan of the great variety Cabernet Franc. And on my last trip to Argentina, obviously didn't go last year because of COVID and lockdown. So I was last there in 2019. I spent some time specifically where this is from in Paraje Altamira, and it was just one of the greatest wine days I've ever had. You know, just it's a phenomenal place, breathtakingly beautiful. You're about 1,000 meters above sea level. The air is incredibly pure. There's no roads, there's no traffic. So it's any noise that you do hear is just entirely natural animals or, you know, people going, did he really choose to wear that shirt here? And we just had a fantastic day. And, it's nice to, hopefully introduce people to something they might not have had or might not have thought about. So, ended up with this Zuccardi Appellation Paraje Altamira, which I think is wonderful. But
I see you have the glass there. Are you drinking the same as us?
I am indeed. Here it is to the camera so you can see.
Before we plough straight into it, I just want to say a quick shout out to our friends at thewinereserve.co.uk for helping us out with this bottle. It was really good of them. Is there anything we should be doing before we taste this? I'm classing this as almost like an official wine tasting lesson.
Make it quick, I'm thirsty.
I think that's the best way to do it, is get straight into it. I teach and lecture around wine, and a lot of that involves tasting and the tasting process. And there's some really cool science behind it. But, if I go into that, I'll completely derail your show and no one will ever listen to it again. But that sensory perception is kind of unique to each person. But I think just a little swirl to get a bit of air in there, sticking your nose in, start to see if you can pinpoint any fruits or characters, depending on, how interested you are in wine, how much you want to explore that. If you're drinking wine, just give it that swirl and stick your nose in and start to think about the things you're smelling. And then, then there's two options. You can either taste it, and write a very detailed note and consider food matching and talk about structure and acidity, or you can just drink it, which is ultimately what we're all here for, isn't it?
Let's go with that option. So cheers, Lee.
Cheers again.
Cheers. Hello.
So take us back to the start, Lee. How did you get into all this? Where did it all begin?
Alcoholic parents, really. No, I shouldn't say that. I've been around wine since about the age of 5 or 6, so I had quite a continental style upbringing. My parents encouraged me to taste, a very small amount of white wine, and that was topped up with water or lemonade. I always clarify this because I work in the world of wine, and I sort of live and work in and around Oxford. It's not where I'm from, but I've lived in and around and worked in Oxford for sort of over a decade now, and I got to know a lot of people who would say, oh yes, I kind of grew up with wine as well, but they came from a very different socio-economic background to me. They grew up drinking fine claret and fancy Burgundy and wines I'd never heard of. And I'm from a normal northern working class family. I'm quite fiercely proud of that as well. So wine wasn't fancy or snobby or pretentious for us. We just drank, I suppose, really what the popular wines were that you could easily get in the supermarkets. We maybe at Christmas had a bottle of Chateauneuf de Pape or something like that, but we certainly didn't grow up drinking expensive or, in inverted commas, fancy wines. I had the kind of upbringing where I was encouraged to enjoy, I suppose, what some people might call the finer things in life, but I always think that sounds a bit pretentious, even though it isn't. So, my old man, he liked music. and he liked nice food, and he liked good wine, and it was, you know, every meal was home cooked, and it was the family around the table, and wine was a big part of that. And I just became really interested in it. And there's a key event that I didn't realize was key at the time. There's a quote from Kierkegaard about life can only be understood backwards but must be lived forwards. Yes, dear listeners, I have Wikipedia as well, and I can look up philosophers. But there's this great quote, and it's only now I realise the importance of it, but I was 13 in a hotel in London with my mum. She ordered a glass of house red in the hotel bar. I said, can I taste it? Yes. And so I immediately set about doing my best impression of Gilly Goulden and Oz Clarke, and I was very dramatically swirling the glass and sticking my nose in and sniffing and go, oh, yes, raspberries and cherries. I have a clue what I was talking about. Then I, you know, tasted the wine, and I did the horrendous slurpy noise. My mother was dying of shame in the corner by this point. And I pronounced to the hotel, you know, the bar, I think this is an Australian Shiraz. And my mum said, you're 13, shut up, you don't know what you're talking about. But it was an Australian Shiraz. Now, you know, I'm 13, I don't know anything about this. I knew there was a grape variety called Shiraz, but I knew that there was more than that. I knew that there was one called Cabernet Sauvignon, there was one called Merlot. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't understand why they had different names. I also knew that wine didn't just come from Australia. So, you know, I knew the Italians made it and the French made it. But I think somewhere in my head, something happened and went, isn't that really interesting? That by looking at this thing, smelling it and tasting it, which is a capacity that most of us have got, I can identify something very specific. You know, I wasn't just going, yeah, it's red wine.
Yeah.
It's this grape from this place. Now, in case anybody's listening going, wow, this guy's got amazing tasting talent, I'm pretty good. No, all I was doing was recognizing what we drank at home. We drank a lot of Aussie Shiraz at home, and that was the popular wine at the time. So I was recognizing it. But that really planted that seed of wine is super interesting, isn't it? What a cool... I've never been drawn to it because it's alcohol. I think because I grew up being allowed to taste different wines and even spirits. I never did that thing like, great, I'm 18, I can go and get plastered now.
It is a bonus, though.
It is a bonus. I mean, I have done that, but not for those reasons. So fast forward to me being 18, I was accepted to university and I was taking a year out. And a job came up in my local odd bins. And I was a Saturday boy for W.H. Smith's, which was opposite the odd bins. And I just used to look at it and go, wow, what a great job. You just sit around and drink wine all day, which it's not. Being a wine merchant is not. If that is a job somewhere, somebody let me know. So I applied for this job. I thought, you know, I'll work 3 or 4 months in this odd bins, taste a bit of wine, learn a little bit, go traveling, come back to university, whatever. And I got this job. It was a full-time job. And within 3 months, I contacted the university and said, you know, thanks very much for giving me a place at your prestigious institution. I won't be coming. There was immediately a huge cheer on the other end of the phone. I think I heard a party popper go off as well. It's now an annual calendar celebration. And I've been in wine ever since. I've never been a planner. I don't plan things. I don't think ahead particularly like that and say, well, in 5 years, I want to be doing this and so on. I've never looked at the world that way, rightly or wrongly. But I just got this job in odd bins and it was a great place to be. I was surrounded by really cool, interesting people. I was tasting incredible wines. I just thought, what a great lifestyle, you know. And I by that point sort of moved out, lived in a flat with a friend of mine who was a really good chef. He was young British meat chef of the year at some point. And it was just that melee of all these things coming together. And I've been in wine ever since. And that was 2002 that I joined odd bins.
What did your parents think when you rejected university to become a professional wine drinker?
Well, it was quite interesting because the assumption is, isn't it? It's like that sort of, oh, I'm going to be a musician. No, go and get a real job.
Yeah.
The older I get, the more I realise that a lot of people don't have a great relationship with their parents. And I've been incredibly blessed that I'm very close to both my folks. My father's no longer here, sadly. I'm still very close to my mum. Can kind of talk to her about it. And they're really good friends, not just parent and child. So when I sat them down and said, look, I'm really enjoying this. I'm thinking of, you know, staying here. I don't know what that means. I don't know. I still at that point didn't know that wine was a career, but I really want to stay doing this. I'm earning some money. All right, not much, but, you know, I'm 18. Whatever you earn as a salary is more than you've ever earned before. And essentially they just said, have you thought about this? Is this what you really want to do? Yes, it is. There's an element, I think, of you're big enough and old enough, and if it goes wrong, you'll have to deal with that. But that's a good learning experience for somebody growing up. But they were just supportive of it. they very quickly saw that I loved what I was doing, and they very quickly realised that the people around me were good people. So I was working with good people, and went, well, fair enough, carry on. And I've just done it ever since.
Yeah, that's very progressive parenting. I worked in a few schools, and that's what all parents are taught now. My kids are teenagers, and you're not meant to stand in their way or let them follow their passion and what they enjoy. And I sort of scoff at that, but it's good to hear that that's happening.
I suppose my view of parenting from my experiences, I look at it a bit like being a winemaker. I think what a winemaker should do is gently guide the wine to a place where he thinks it can be, rather than manufacture it to be in that place. So I don't think a winemaker goes, I've got these grapes, that's starting point A, I want to make B, I'm going to force it there, even if the fruit isn't that's where it should be going. I think as a parent, I try and guide my son rather than force him in a direction, I suppose. Yeah, I suppose it's quite progressive. Certainly from the way my parents were brought up by their parent would have been very different.
Are you still involved with Wine Matters? Because you were head of education there. That's the oldest wine school in Oxford, isn't it?
That's right. So there's a series of qualifications you can do in wine, which are run by the Wine and Spirit Education Trust, WSET. And anybody that's got more than a passing interest in wine, at least go and do level 1 and 2, because even if you're not in the trade, you really do learn so much. But it's, the people that you're learning with, obviously it's a bit different now because we're in lockdowns and such, but when you can get back in the classroom, it's really valuable. So I passed the WSET diploma. It's now called level 4, and that's a 2-year course. I passed that. I did that 2011 to 2013, and the reason it came so late for me was I just couldn't afford it. So I've never had any money. Being a wine merchant's not. Here's the sob story. Being a wine merchant isn't a hugely paid job for 99% of our industry. So I moved to Oxford in 2010, and I started running the Oxford Wine Company's flagship store in Oxford. I kind of moved to Oxford to open it. And the Oxford Wine Company were really good to me, and I had a brilliant 5 years with them, and they said, we'll pay for your diploma. It's like, ka-ching, I'm in. And I studied it through Wine Matters. And Wine Matters was actually the first non-educational institution in the world to be allowed to teach diploma. So before that, you could only be taught kind of through universities or through the WSET Wine School. So I did my diploma with them. I got on with the guy who owned the business, who's a master of wine. And it came to the time for me to I'd sort of done my time at the Oxford Wine Company, and it was that natural time to move on. And he said, look, I think I've got a job for you as head of education. And I ended up doing that for about 3 years and absolutely loved it. What an opportunity. Again, so I'm a simple northern working class farming boy, right? That's all I'll ever be. Suddenly I'm traveling to Barbados to lecture and teach people on wine. I'm traveling regularly to Italy and all over the place. And I was running about 100, 120 wine tastings a year, be it through the wine school and formal teaching or my own kind of freelance wine events. And I could never have planned that. I didn't realise that was a thing at 18. I think probably around 2010, 2011, I thought, wine education, I think I could do that. I like seeing other people do well. And I thought, if I know a little bit about wine, I mean, a tiny amount, but if the knowledge that I do have, if that can help somebody else do well or move on in their career or whatever, I'd really love to do that. I think it makes you want to learn more. So if you're a teacher or a speaker, you sort of go, I've got to be really on top of this material. So it encourages you to learn even more. So no, I don't work for Wine Matters anymore. I left there in 2017, but that was a great job. And I did so many amazing things. I'm very privileged and undeservedly so.
Surely you couldn't be drinking wine every day, surely.
I gave it a damn good go, which explains my physical state currently.
That begs the question, do you spit or swallow?
I at home swallow. When it's work, spit. So for example, when I was out in Barbados, so I was running a course out there, the level 3 course, which is 5 days of solid teaching, and we would have been doing 24 to 30 wines a day to cover the material, and that's a lot of wine. It's easy to sit and go, I could 24 wines in a day, easy. When you're doing that at that level and you're really trying to learn about it, it's so much. You get about halfway through and you go, can I just have a cup of tea?
But you've got 24 glasses, basically.
Yeah. So you've got to spit them out. So I remember everybody does this when they join the industry. You go to your first big wine fair. For me, it was the London Wine Fair at Excel, which is At one point, it was the biggest wine fair in the world. It's not that now. I think that's Provine, which is in Germany. But you go there, and everybody's there. You name a wine producer, they're there. They've got all their wines for you to try, and you go, well, hey, I'm getting stuck in. I remember the first time I went. So the guy that's taken me there, and he's gone, look, I know you're pretty young, you're new to this. It's a big day out in London. You know, I grew up in the cold northwest. All the bright lights of London. I'm going, an amazing time. He said, you've got to spit out, and he's like, I'm 18. Don't need to spit out. Look at you. What are you? You're 37. You're really old, mate. And we get to this wine fair, and about an hour and a half in, you know, and you're tasting pretty rapidly. I was about an hour and a half in, and I went, yeah, I think I'm done, because I can't stand up from this chair. I can't see straight, and I'm pretty sure I'm definitely going to need a cab to get me back to the hotel. And you sort of realise you can't do that when you're tasting at that level. So I would taste, I suppose, in a typical year, and obviously we haven't had one of those for a while, but I might taste, 1,500, 2,000 wines over the course of a year. I've got to be spitting those out. And a lot of the time I'm driving. So, I'm driving to an event.
No, what a predicament.
It's awful, isn't it? It's the very definition of a first world problem. So, for example, last February, I was up in Larbert because the company I work for, they've got an office there, and we were running some training. So I've driven all the way up to Larbert, not far from Glasgow, done 3 days training, and gone, I've now got to drive home. I've got to be spitting this out. So I sort of trained myself. There are certain wines we go, I'm not spitting that out. But over the course of 24 in a day, you might drink a couple of them. But then, I said my drinking for at home.
Somebody pulls out a bottle of Petrus or whatever it is, you're not spitting that, surely.
Oh, no, that's not happening at all. I remember being on a brilliant trip to Germany, and it was one of those trips where I normally you'd sort of rotate the driving, and somehow I managed to get out of doing any driving for this 3-day trip. And and another guy did as well, my friend Guy, and we just sat in the back of this. We'd driven over in one of these big Land Rover Discoveries, and we just sat in the back of this Land Rover Discovery, driving down the Autobahn, pelting out AC/DC. And him and I, we'd grab half a bottle from the producer we'd just seen and go, yeah, we'll just swig that in the back. Yeah, I don't think I drank for about a week and a half after I got home, and went, I just probably need to lay off a little bit. But also, it's all too easy to go down a slippery slope, not to sort of be negative, but, I've worked with people who come in and they're putting slugs of vodka in the coffee in the morning, and that's not, and you're surrounded by it, and it's always open. And if there's been a lot of chat of late about the wine industry or the drinks industry and mental health, and the things you need for mental health, are regular sleep patterns, not too much alcohol, and ideally, not too many financial worries. And you go, the drinks industry is the exact opposite of all of that, all of it. So there's always an element. I try to have 2 to 3 days a week, ideally in a row, where I don't drink. I can still taste because of my job. I sort of have to go, as long as I spit this out, I have to say that's all right. But if I swallow this, I'm drinking it.
Now, this wine that we're drinking there, I'm going to say really nice. This is the Zuccardi. I'm sure I read it. They won Vineyard of the Year, or Best Vineyard in the Year in the world 2 years in a row, something like that.
2 years in a row. So there's this. There are several wine competitions, and one of these things that they do is world's best vineyard. I'm not entirely sure how that's judged. Genuinely, I don't really. I think they take into account what can people experience when they go there. Is it nice to look at? And then other aspects about how well the fruit and the vines are maintained. And so there's all sorts of criteria. But I visited this vineyard a couple of times, and it was one I was at last August in Paraque Altamira. So it's called Piedra Infinita, which means the infinite stone or the infinite rock. Yeah, I've been very privileged. I've travelled to a lot of wineries and a lot of different vineyards around the world, and this is genuinely one of the most breathtaking, staggering places I've ever been to. So it's in Paraque Altamira is the name of sort of like the specific area, which sits in a part of Mendoza called the Uco Valley. And the important thing is there you're sort of like 1,000 meters above sea level, and it's give or take 2 hours from Mendoza city. So you're really in the middle of nowhere. There's no other amenities here. So if you fall ill, you've got like a 2-hour trip to the hospital, and this is Argentina, so you're probably better off just trying to heal yourself in the vineyard, to be honest. And it's just, the air is fresh, there's no pollution, the quality of light that you get is really pure because of where you are and you're higher up. And it's all, there's a lot of, I'm going to do some soil chat now because that's what people want, isn't it? Soil chat, folks. Come on.
We were hoping you would go, woohoo, soil!
Soil chat, rocks. That's cool. That's what people want to talk about. But it's got all these huge boulders and calcareous rocks. But you're right in the foothill of the mountains. And this winery, it's staggeringly beautiful. And the fact that it's won this award twice. But you look at this vineyard and the winery and everything they've done, and it's just staggering. If anybody, it's a long way to go to Mendoza. It's like going to Australia. It's the same travel time. But if you get the chance to go to Mendoza, but to go to this Piedra Infinita vineyard, it is stunning. Absolutely stunning place.
Now, your favourite's Argentina wine. You like Spanish wine as well? Why do you go there? Why is that your favourites? I like Spanish wine, and I've got my own reason. It's just because I don't get hangovers, but, you know.
Oh, right. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to have to try that. So I'm a wine lover. Ultimately, I love wine, and I have things that I go to more than others. I think everybody does. It's like saying you're a music fan, but you've got favourite bands. My wife is from Argentina. So my wife is from a little town called San Martin, which is about 25 minutes outside of Mendoza City. And it's a perfect base for me. So my wife can spend a lot of time with her family. But from a sort of a work or education perspective, I can say, look, I'm going to take 2 or 3, 4 days, drive around and visit some producers. And I've got to know some producers out there quite well. And it's the country where I've spent the most amount of time. I spent a lot of time in Italy. So when I was at Wine Matters, we had a sister business and we imported reasonably high-end Italian stuff. And I was in Italy 6 times a year, and I adore Italy, just the whole country. Everything about Italy, I just love it. But Argentina, I've visited a lot, and I've been all over the country, and I've done Buenos Aires and Salta and Patagonia, and I just love it. And it sort of naturally, because of that, has kind of become an area that, well, hang on, I've got more experience there other than Italy. I should talk more about Argentina. And I genuinely love the wines as well. So it sort of all came together.
You're obviously a wine expert. We're clearly not a wine expert, and there's going to be a lot of people that would listen to this that won't be wine experts as well. So for a sort of a layman that will either go to their local supermarket to buy a 7-8 pound bottle of wine or slightly more than that, what can someone do to enhance their wine drinking experience on a very simple level, whether it's decanting it, whether it's doing something different, or any tips that you would have for people that can't afford to go and spend 40 quid, 50 quid on a bottle of wine, as most people can?
It's a really good question, because there's so many different angles to it. So I suppose I'll preface it. I've realised I'm a terrible guest, because what I do is I take your question, then say something else, and eventually answer it. I'm horrendous, which is because I do my own show on Instagram Live, and if someone did that to me, I'm like, can you just answer what I've asked you? Thanks. The thing that I love most about my job is trying to help other people see and experience as much joy in wine as I find from it. And if I can do that, whether that person learns any technical stuff or not is irrelevant. If they go, wow, I really enjoyed that helped my evening feel a bit better, then I've done my job. So I just want people to share in the joy that I find in it. So my first piece of advice is, if it's possible, try and find a local independent wine merchant. People work in independent wine merchants because they care about the product, they care about the person who's making that product, but they also care about the end consumer or end user of that product. And that's the magic triumvirate. If you've got those 3 things, you get the best service and quality. And what you also get in indies is, if you go in and say, look, I want to spend 7 quid. In the past, I've had X, Y, and Z, and I've liked it. The person in that shop goes, I've got a list of stuff I think you'll like, let's talk about it. So you get that little bit of guidance, which I think is really important in a subject like wine, and not just wine, many other subjects. If going to an indie is, for whatever reason, not feasible, spend what you're comfortable with, because I always hear when you say, just spend a bit more. That potentially takes that drinker into unfamiliar territory. And wine's a really funny thing in that, in order to understand certain wines, you have to have experienced other certain wines. And if you've not, that can be really challenging, especially given most people are just buying this stuff to go, I just want to relax on Thursday night and have a nice glass of wine. I don't want to have to suddenly go through reams of stuff that I've had before and go, oh, that's what this wine is doing. So kind of spend within your comfort zone for sure. When you're having that glass of wine and you really enjoy it, just take a few extra seconds to think about why you're enjoying it. And it could just be, do you know what, this is Cabernet Sauvignon. I've realised I like that. Or it could be, I've realised that this is quite full-bodied. I like that. Or I've realised there's something specific that this wine's doing that I like. And if you can put that into words, when you go into that indie, it would help. Or to be honest, Google, independent wine merchant first, if that's most. Google good full-bodied red because you like full-bodied. I think that gives you a good steer. It's quite a minefield to navigate. But if you know you like a particular grape or you like a particular country, stay within that and then find someone who maybe knows a tiny bit more than you, whether it's a friend or an indie merchant or whoever, and go, oh, I like wines from Argentina. Where else could I try? Should I try Chile or America or wherever? Or just call me.
The whole wine industry's got so many gadgets, and we're gadget guys. All men are gadget guys. Is there 2 or 3 gadgets you'd recommend out of the myriad of rubbish out there? Is there a couple that you would say definitely get that would help?
Do you know, I'm a pretty simple guy. So I've been given all sorts of fancy corkscrews as presents, and I still come down to a very simple Waiter's Friend. I find that the best. Decanter, get yourself a nice decanter, because decanting wine, I decant everything, red, white, I don't decant fizzy. But decanting wines help. So getting yourself a nice decanter. Wine thermometers. I know quite a few people like those. You stick it on your bottle and it tells you what temperature your wine's at. I think having a nice set of wine glasses and a decanter, I think that enhances the experience of drinking so much.
But a decanter, does that not mean you need to finish the bottle?
Well, I mean, who isn't? Who's are the people not doing that? That's a huge concern to me. Do you know? It's an interesting industry stat here. 25% of 18 to 35-year-olds don't drink at all. Now, there's another interesting stat. I don't know if you're aware of it. 25% of 18 to 35-year-olds are bloody idiots. Now, I don't know if those 2 things are related. I've not done the research, but most decanters have a stopper in. So if you're not finishing that bottle, put the stopper in it. If you're really concerned if it'll fit in the fridge, depends, because some decanters are really fancy. Try and keep it cool, because that slows down any biological decay in the wine or anything like that for the next day. But if it isn't, you need to up your game and finish it off.
Well, yeah, that's true. I've got one of those vac pumps. You think those help?
Yeah, they work. They do really. And then you can put the bottle back in the fridge. They're good. But ideally, just drink your wine.
The best advice ever.
Yeah, I mean, especially now during lockdown. What are you doing? You're watching Netflix. That demands a bottle of wine.
It seems to be coming almost back in fashion. These, boxed wines, when I was growing up, was a big no-no. But boxed wines and pod sort of type bags of wine seem to be coming back in fashion. Is that something you would say to people worthwhile trying, or stick to traditional bottles?
It's certainly growing. So there's a lot of concern now and a lot of thought now, again, as there should be, about carbon footprint. And a really scary statistic is that I think it's about 85% of wine's carbon footprint is in that glass bottle. So in the production of that glass bottle and then moving that glass bottle around the world. Now, I suppose it's cognitive dissonance. I love glass bottles, and I find it I don't find it difficult to get away from them, but ultimately for me, that's always what should be in a glass bottle. I think canned wine is really exciting. I've had some great canned stuff, and it's brilliant. But glass bottles will never go away. But there's also this growth, you're quite right, of bag-in-box and all of that. And I think the issue it faces is, if we remember it how it used to be, it was never good wine, was it? It was just bulk crap juice, sold cheaply, aimed for somebody who just wants a glass of wine without thinking about it. And that isn't the case now. So there's a producer, I think they're called When in Rome, and they're making some really good stuff. They've got a deal they do some stuff with Waitrose. And their wines are really good. And it's like the canned wine thing. 10 years ago, canned wine was just cheap rubbish in a can. Whereas now people are going, no, I'm going to take good wine and put that in a can and kind of aim at a slightly different market than this thing did 10 years ago. And I think bag-in-box is doing the same. So there's some really good stuff. And it's ultimately, wine is horses for courses. So, really high-end Bordeaux and Burgundy, is that ever going to be bag-in-box? No, it isn't. That's going to be in a glass bottle with a cork, because ultimately that's the best container and vessel for what that wine is supposed to do, which is age well. Bag-in-box is no longer just cheap naff stuff, but it's decent wine going. If you're a regular drinker and you want something decent, you don't want to break the bank, but you are concerned about, carbon footprint and the environment, maybe this is the thing for you. So I think that will go. I've just started working with a producer in Italy called Vincio Serra. They've only just started coming into the UK. I've sort of listed a couple of their wines.
Vince?
No, so Vincio Valio Serra is the name of the producer. And a lot of what they produce is bag in box. And a lot of that is sold in Italy. And a huge amount is sold massive in the States. Huge out there. So I think it will grow. And, just the fact that it's that different direction to it. So it's not just, it's only old crap, stick it in that box. It's now, let's put good wine in here. So I think, it's a really exciting
It's
area.
not like age, Ryan, like you're saying. It's just canned and boxed, ready to drink. Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's it. So because of what wine needs the sort of the ingress of extrinsic oxygen to age, which is why cork is really good. So it needs a bit of air, basically. When you put wine in a bag in box or in a can, it's hermetically sealed. So all that will happen is the wine won't get better, but at some point it will fall apart because it won't hold itself together long enough. So it's about saying we're going to put good wine in there for immediate consumption. I did some stuff with imaginatively titled The Canned Wine Company, and they're kind of the highest end wine in cans that I've tried. So a 250ml can was sort of 5-6 quid, 6-7 quid, something like that. So again, that's quite premium, but the quality of the liquid was there. Whereas 10 years ago, it would just been, how cheap is this? Well, to get it cheap, the wine will be worse. You don't care.
Well, that's 2 glasses, isn't it, roughly, or something maybe?
The way I pour, I mean, it's nearly the whole bottle. So 250 is 1 large glass or 2 small in a bar or restaurant.
Your Instagram handle, Twitter handle, Wineman147.
Yeah,
we're snooker fans, so we can't walk past the fact that you're obviously a snooker fan as well, which is how we sort of connected in the first place. Do you go to a lot of tournaments? Do you play? Who's your favourite player? All 3 questions all rolled into one sweet package.
Do you know, I bloody love snooker. I look for, so I'm going to get a bit existential again, because that's the sort of thing I do. My philosophy of life is that life is just a series of connected moments, right? And a lot of those moments are dull, dreary, forgettable. It's driving to an office, it's going to pay the bills. They're not memorable. You're not on your deathbed going, oh yeah, I remember I went to the post office that time to post those. Like, you don't do that. So I think part of being alive is ultimately I'm an absurdist. So I read Albert Camus when I was about 16, and it hugely informed my world choice and made me sound even more pretentious. Again, I reiterate, I'm northern, working class. I just read some books once. And so I have this absurdist view that, like, what you've got to do is, whatever that moment is, try and give it meaning and try and find joy in it. Like, so I think that's what we should do. And that's part of wine. And snooker for me is that. Snooker is one of the few things in my day-to-day life that, whether I'm at a tournament watching it, whether I'm watching it on the telly, the only thing I'm thinking about is the snooker. Everything, a lot of other things. So even when I'm playing my guitar, in the back of my mind, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to get up early in the morning because I've got to get my son somewhere, or something's going on. Snooker, I'm fully immersed in it. I've been to quite a lot of events. I went to the shootout in 2015, which was in Blackpool, but I got like backstage tickets.
Yeah.
And I think it was the second day. So we got the players' lounge, and that, I was like a kid at Christmas because these guys are my heroes. And I actually ended up, you could, the thing with the shootout, as you will know, is you don't have to sit still for the whole frame. You can leave mid-frame, which we didn't do. If the frame started, we saw, it's only 10 minutes. But I went with the guy I used to know, and we sort of went, do you know what, we'll go back to the players' lounge and just grab a beer and sit and watch a couple on the screens. And we sat watching it, and sort of diagonally opposite me, there's a guy who I knew who he was, but I don't want to spoil the story. And there was a piece of commentary, which was Willie Thorne, rest his soul. And Willie Thorne said something like, oh, that was a good shot. And it was Jimmy White. And he said, oh, that's quite something given your standards, Willie. And I overheard it, burst out laughing. And that just blew my mind. It's like, Jimmy White was my hero. I know you're big Stephen Hendry fans, but it's like, Jimmy White was my guy. And that final in '94 with Miss Black. And I'm sat here watching snooker with Jimmy White. Just blew my mind. I've met Ronnie a couple of times. I think Ronnie makes it quite difficult to be a fan of Ronnie at times, but
exactly.
When I don't get into that whole Ronnie, I'm a snooker fan and then a Ronnie fan. I'm not the other way around. It's one of those things. It frustrates me a bit when he's not playing and Rob Walker comes out at the final and everybody's going, Ronnie. It's like, he's not even in it. He's not here. But I've met Ronnie a couple of times, and again, that was a proper wow.
so jealous of that.
I technically didn't. I kind of had dinner with him, but without having dinner with him. It was when he won his 7th Masters, and in between the 2 sessions, we went out to get a bite to eat, and we sat there having a bite to eat, and into the restaurant comes Ronnie, and he sat at the table next to us and had dinner. So I technically had dinner with Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Of course.
Not at the same table and not talking to him. But yeah, I'm a huge Ronnie fan. I just love snooker. I think it's brilliant. I love the artistry of it. Watching it going. I remember my first trip to the Crucible. That was what a place the Crucible is.
Amazing.
It's incredible, isn't it? And it's wholly unfit for hosting a snooker tournament.
Exactly.
I remember so I walked in and looked down and just sort of realised they can barely fit these 2 tables. If you took 3 or 4 inches off either side, you couldn't do it. It's incredible. And the atmosphere there, I know you had the lovely Phil Seymour on, who was definitely drinking because he said ridiculously nice things about him. And I want to publicly say that that was very, very kind of him. And I was genuinely humbled by the nice things he said.
Oh, no, you don't want to hear what he said about you afterwards, don't worry.
Yeah. Well, no, best not. I keep giving him wine when he's in Milton Keynes. But I think he said, you come down those steps and it's like the audience are on top of you. And it's like, if you're a snooker fan and you've never made it, try it as hard as you can. It's just an incredible experience.
Oh, it's a cathedral of snooker. It blew us away. Yeah, it's amazing.
We've just, obviously, it's, we're going to be limited to crowds this year, so we've just deferred.
Yeah.
We should have been going, but we've taken option 2 and deferred to next year's.
When I was really ill with pneumonia, I got a tweet from, is it Shelley Higgins, Alex Higgins' niece?
Yeah, we're going to try and get her on, actually, Shelley.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I mean, I don't know her at all, but I was tweeting about being really upset that I couldn't go to the snooker, and she just replied, like, "I'll get well soon." I'm like, that's cool. But my mum met Alex Higgins in a Workington nightclub, and he knocked her teeth out, and she didn't get the bouncer to do it, but the bouncer saw it because she was a local girl.
Did you just say Alex Higgins knocked your mum's teeth out?
Yeah. So he was sort of hitting on her, and she wasn't having any of it. Next thing, I think he slapped her or something. He's knocked a filling out or something. So the bouncers have turfed him down the stairs and chucked him out. Now, my favourite part about this was the very first snooker event I went to. It was, a little exhibition, and it was Steve Davis and John Virgo. And this would have been late 90s, something like that. And they've done this exhibition, and you queue up afterwards to meet them and shake their hands and all of that. And I always wear hats, and I wear a fedora. So I turned up to, get their autographs, and the 2 of them looked at each other, and Steve Davis went, "Oh, I've got a young Alex Higgins here." And I don't know what on earth possessed me. I went, "Oh, I've got a funny story about Alex Higgins." So Steve Davis looks at JV, looks back, looks at me, and went, "Go on then." I went, "Oh, he knocked my mum's teeth out in a Workington nightclub." Steve Davis just looks at me and he went, "Do you expect me to be surprised by that?" It's not very. And then he went, "It's not a very funny story, is it?" And I sort of went, No, it's not. Would you sign this? Incredible. I rewatch it quite regularly, but that semi-final frame in 1982 against Jimmy White, where he that's the best break ever made on a snooker table. I know
it's insane.
It's just, I know you got Ronnie's fastest maxi and that break of 69, because every shot is out of position. I can watch that again and again and again and never get bored of it, even though you know what's coming. It just, it's magnificent. I love that story Ken Doherty tells, where he says Alex Higgins has gone round to Ken Doherty's house, so he's got his own snooker room, and they're having a few balls. And Doherty, he's got sort of football pictures ever anyway, Ken Doherty, and he's got Alex Higgins is wandering around while Doherty's re-racking him, and he wanders up and he's looking at this picture of George Best. And Alex Higgins, he's just got his vodka and orange and a cigarette, and he just looks at this picture of George Best and he goes, what a waste. Like, the absolute irony of that is just, and the way Ken Doherty tells that story, it's just joyous. It's sad, but joyous. Like, just not aware at all. But yeah, what a character.
Just as we're wrapping up here, Lee, what's on the horizon for you? Have you got anything big coming up?
Well, as things return to normal, obviously sort of my day job will become busier. So that's, something to look forward to, because I work with a variety of people all over the country, from Scotland all the way down to Cornwall, I'll get busier in terms of running training courses and starting to get out hosting wine dinners and such, which would be, nice to get back doing that from a sort of formal day job perspective. I do a lot of stuff on social media, so I have this. I'm always reticent to use the word show because that feels too formal for the faffing about that I do. But I do this show called Poor Decisions, which is really clever. That's why I'm in comedy. But I wouldn't say interview, but I chat to people from the wine. I've had masters of wine on, I've had wine producers, all sorts of people like that. And we just talk kind of about what they do, their life in wine, how they got into it. It's not a technical chat at all. I'm doing quite a lot. So as we record this, it's the beginning of what's called the Big English Wine Easter. So last year there was a big initiative on social media, which is called the Big English Wine Good Friday. So Jacob Ledley, who's one of our best winemakers in England, he realised that, if for one day this year, if everybody that drinks wine bought a bottle of English wine, that would save our industry, because obviously COVID lockdown, we're on the verge of collapse, no bars, no restaurants, and it was a huge success. And they've done it again this year, and I was very, very humbled that Jacob approached me and said, I'd like you to be involved. So me being me, I can never just go, oh yeah, I'll just do a Poor Decisions chat with some English winemakers. I've gone, how can I make this as complicated and unwieldy as possible and hope that it's a train wreck? So I'm doing this thing where it's called the Big English Wine Easter, Big English Wine Mastermind, snappy. I've got 6 producers coming on over the course of an hour, and we're going to do a mastermind quiz on English wine and their specialist subject. And then, just carrying on, I do these silly wine music videos. I've got some of those lined up, and hopefully before too long we'll be able to travel, and I'm keen to get back out. I was due to be in Italy a couple of times. I actually did have a trip almost lined up to New Zealand that fell through, but I think they're a little way off. But I'll keep doing what I'm doing, making a racket with the guitar and drinking good wine.
Well, we look forward to hearing more and more of you on social media,
Absolutely. Mate. And if you ever want to do a snooker mastermind, bear us in part of your
well, I'll tell you what, you're on for that, because I spoke to Phil yesterday after I listened to the podcast with him on it, and sort of went, oh, he said nice things about me. Nobody ever does that. And I said, no, it doesn't have to be about wine. I just do wine because I'm in wine. But, Phil agreed to come on. So if you want to come on this Poor Decisions debacle, and we'll turn it into some kind of snooker mastermind, that would be enormous.
Not a problem. We would love to do that. As long as there's obviously still some kind of wine involved. So let's wait till after the Crucible so Phil can enjoy one.
Most definitely. Snooker's Biggest Loser that him and Sean Murphy is doing is just fantastic. And it's easy with the news and the press today to sort of get a bit down about the state of the world, but you see what they're doing, it's good for them, of course, but, they're raising money for such great charities. And, I think Sean said, didn't he, for every ton he makes, he's going to throw in 100 quid over $1,000 now, which with his scoring ability, he's not a no-hoper, is he? He's not like, if I make a century, what do you mean, if, Sean? I just think that's wonderful what they're doing. And, hopefully I can sort of put together once we're all able to move about, I'd like to do some kind of live wine tasting to raise money for them. But, it's a little way down the track. But definitely. But I just want to say, thanks for having me on. I feel a bit out of place because you've got some really prestigious, cool, smart, quite high-profile guests on here. And then you've got me. So I can only assume this is part of some government scheme or something, but thank you so much.
No, Lee, thank you so much. And if we don't catch up with you before it, we'll try and make a date to, if you've got tickets for next year, we'll try and hook up with you live.
Definitely. Oh, that would be awesome. Absolutely love to.
Most definitely.
Brilliantly. Thank you so much for coming on. Take care now.
Take care. All the best.
Thanks very much.
You've been listening to the Smokies and Wine podcast, sponsored by Clackenview Wealth Management, working with you today to plan for your tomorrow.